In this video, I'm going to talk to the amazing publisher of Xenophon books, Richard Williams, who's not just publishing all the old masters, he's also training horses and people in the old master system. And we are going to unlock the secrets of the shoulder in and the renvers according to Monsieur François Robichon de la Guérinière in 1730. It's amazing stuff. You want to stick around till the end, because then we're going to show you how you take it into the Piaffe, that golden snitch that we can grab as we're going along on our broomsticks like Harry Potter, trying to understand this old masters thing. We're going to talk about how you snatch that golden snitch of Piaffe out of the air. So do make sure you stick around to the end. If you like it, thumbs up.
All right, rockers, we're back with Mr. Richard Williams, who is the publisher of Xenophon Press, who publishes all the cool old dead dude stuff that we all work from and that we nerd out to. So thank you so much, Richard, for doing this. I don't know how you do it. I know how difficult publishing is. I don't know how you have a life and also manage to train your horses on top of publishing all these books, because you publish a bunch of them, and we are lucky enough to benefit from them. Now, most of us in dressage nerdy land pretty much agree that a man from the 18th century in France called François Robichon de la Guérinière, and de la Guérinière, by the way, is just the name of a town in Western France that this dude came from in the 18th century, that the book by him called The School of Riding, or the École de la Cavalerie, which was published in the early 18th century, is kind of the book. And people like the great Nuno Oliveira said, this is the book. And a bunch of other people said, this is the book. And when we read La Guérinière, he himself says, hey, listen, lads, I'm just trying to clarify some unclear stuff from the previous generations, people like de la Broue, William Cavendish, the Duke of Newcastle, maybe Pluvinel, and others who wrote a bunch of useful stuff down, but unfortunately contradict themselves every 5 pages because they aristocrats and they didn't want to, edit, and couldn't, tell us the difference between a nuance and a new actual contradiction. So therefore, it's all kind of murky. So I, the keeper of the royal stables in the early 18th century, am going to try to clarify this. Oh, and by the way, we're dealing with horses that are a bit bigger and a bit clunkier than the ones that we used to have. So we have to kind of tweak the old way a little bit. We can't just do everything with a vault, a small circle with putting the inside hind under, kind of like we could with all those purely Baroque, Spanishy, Portuguesey, Iberian-y horses that were like the perfect ones in the 17th century, because they all got wiped out in the 30 Years' War, and then they've been breeding them down in Spain ever since, but we haven't had a chance to get them back up here. So sadly, we have to breed with our local breeds, and okay, we're going to tweak it a little bit. And I think you can agree that any of us who've actually sat down, opened La Guérinière and said, all right, I'm going to try to train my pony from this, we've all basically achieved success. And it's really a clear way in. However, you, I think, have gone further into this than most people I know, because you know the material better, because you've published it, you have to edit it, you have to read it and reread it, you've published more than one edition. So I know that you have many insights onto La Guérinière that we horse nerds can benefit from. And I want to ask you, in sort of order, a few questions that clarify even further for the horse nerds that are watching this. In a previous conversation, you told me that before you go really deeply into La Guériniere's book, you need to look at chapters 11 and 12, that chapters 11 and 12 are sort of where the real meat and potatoes are. So without further ado, Richard, thank you for coming back on the show. How do we get going with La Guérinière and all end up looking like that cool dude with his powdered periwig and all his horses going like that? How do we do it? Chapter 11.
Well, thank you for the introduction. It's great to be back, and it's a privilege to talk with you. So with that said, this book, The School of Horsemanship, or École de Cavalerie, is not It's not that thick. It's not
Yeah.
that big. And it
Yeah,
comes in
it's like
basically
that
two
thick.
parts. Yeah. It comes in two parts. The first part is on, animal husbandry and medicine and feeding and, stuff that we've made advances on, nutrition, hoof care. So we published part two, which is basically the training part. And to that end, I will just say that you're right, that the Germans, the Austrians, the Portuguese, the French, the Americans, all of these different schools, the one thing that they can agree on, the Portuguese, all of them agree, okay, if we go back to 1736 to de la Guérinière, everyone can agree that we were good. Basically, what happens in the 19th century is that we get nationalism, so we Germans are great, we French are better, we Brits are our own people. And so what happens is you have a little bit more kind of national pride, and then kind of individuation of the different schools. But before that, there was a lot of cross-pollination. There was a lot of the French king sending his best horsemen to Italy to be trained, and then come back. That's actually what happened with de Pluvinel. De Pluvinel was sent down
This
to
is
Naples.
100 years before.
Yeah, School of Naples. So this is this sweet spot. This 1730 is the sweet spot where
they all
don't
synthesize.
where we don't really have this, they've already have the benefit of themselves either having been trained by the best experts in Europe and brought it back and then like tried it their own way. And so de la Guérinière is just in this sweet spot of, the age of enlightenment. So that's why his work is so valuable. What's your question?
Chapter 11 and 12.
Yeah. So you should not skip the chapters leading up to that. You need to read up chapter 10 all the way through. What I will say about chapter 11 and chapter 12, especially chapter 11, is the chapter on shoulder in. And I read it again last night, and I'm not, unfamiliar with the material, but literally I read a sentence or a short paragraph with two sentences. I stopped and I read it again. And that's how I read the chapter. And I stopped and I thought about it. And then I read the next sentence. And sometimes I would go back to the previous paragraph and read that again. So when you read these, it's not like reading a romance novel. You actually have to go back, because what you get from the third sentence reinforms what was said in the first sentence. And you need to go back with that understanding and have it layered over. But basically what he says is there were people before him, specifically Solomon de la Broue and the Duke of Newcastle, William Cavendish, who did a similar exercise to the shoulder in. William Cavendish did it mainly on a circle or a tiny, tiny volta. And often, I just visited the Duke of Newcastle's. Have you been there?
I have volta the castle. Yeah, tiny manege. So working in your living room with a horse. Yeah,
it's right. And I think it's like 14 meters across, or maybe 16 meters across, and kind of long and skinny. But he has a single pillar in there. And if you go to his engravings, they actually even have his saddle there. One of his saddles had more than one. And he would do the shoulder in on the circle, on the tiny volta with
around that pillar. Yeah.
Around that pillar, as the focal point. The horse is not tied to the pillar. The rider's just using it proximally as a reference point. And why a pillar? Because they didn't want to put an object like a cone on or a pylon on the ground, because they don't want the rider looking down. So the rider can look up and have an elegant posture and go around. Now, what de la Guérinière says is, okay, that definitely supples the haunches, because the haunches are on a bigger circle than the shoulders. by doing that, you get a lot of mobility in the haunches. You get increased mobility, but because the shoulders are not moving as far, the horse ends up dwelling on the shoulders. So this shoulder in or head in volta that was done and favored by Duke of Newcastle was putting the horse on the forehand. We're suppling the haunches, but we're lightening them. So hence the reason for the invention of de la Guériniere's shoulder in. This is why he doesn't just take Duke of Newcastle's invention and just say, yeah, I'm good with that. Because he noticed that the horses would be very supple, but getting heavier on the front legs.
Right. And he also said that because Newcastle and de la Broue are 100 to 150 years before.
Right.
Yeah. And I think he says in his book, listen, back then we had horses that sat on the haunches way easier. And actually you could kind of train the horse with that thing. Sadly, today, in these modern days of the 1720s or whatever he's writing, we've had to, breed some local cart horse into our horses. We don't have quite access to those old bloodlines anymore. So we kind of need now to tweak the thing for our modern horse. There's quite a lot of, decrying how the standard of horsemanship has gone down since the 17th century, now that we're in this sort of TikTok age of the 18th century.
Right.
So yeah, so he innovates basically, right?
And he innovates based on that breed. And another way to say what you're saying is, in Duke of Newcastle's time, they could actually afford to take some weight off the haunches because the horses just sat down.
Absolutely.
So he was probably trying to put a little bit more weight on the front end so that he gained a little bit more mobility of the haunches, because the horse is just sitting and crouching all the time. They don't have mobility.
Yeah.
So what de la Guérinière does is he says, I'm taking this same movement and now I'm putting it along the wall. And the shoulder in does this very, very important thing. He says, okay, when the horse is on single track, he says this in the shoulder in, and we're only on single track. The only thing that the front legs do is they locomote forward and backward, but you don't have any sideways mobility of
You're
the
talking about when you're
shoulder.
just riding along the wall, along the track,
Right.
in a
Or
straight.
even, or even on a single track circle.
Right.
You're getting very, very little rotation.
Right. You're only going in 2 dimensions, forward or backward. That's it. Yeah.
Right. And so to get this mobility of having the horse be able to bring his leg over or step further under, that only comes from these 2-track movements. So it is a gymnasticizing. For example, if we're in left shoulder in, we're training the horse's left front leg to step over, above, and almost in front of the horse's right front leg, which is supporting at that moment. And then by the same token, his left hind leg, when it goes to move in the shoulder in position, he steps over and in front of the horse's right hind leg. So it's stepping towards the horse's midline, under his center of balance. So the beauty of the shoulder in, this is the main beauty of the shoulder in, is that you're using the horse's mass, his weight, as the barbell in his gymnasium. So if you think about the horse's center of balance, or the center of mass, which is, roughly around where the rider is, that is how you determine for each horse the perfect angle of the shoulder in.
Right.
Because
because they do vary. That's one of the confusing things about the shoulder in is what's the shoulder in that I use for this horse versus that horse. Yeah.
Right.
How much
So
angle, how much not. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And there's such a thing as they decreased the angle of the shoulder in to align the inside hind in the path of the outside front. So some people would call that a 2-track shoulder in versus a 3-track shoulder in. And those are also named a 3-trace or a 4-trace shoulder in. So if we're counting the space between legs, it's a track, and we're talking about the actual hoof prints left, it's a trace.
Right. A trace being the print.
Yes.
One of the, immediately I can see a bunch of our viewers going, blah, blah, what?
Yeah, right.
But one of the easiest ways, I think, to help people with that is just think less or more angle, right?
Right.
So,
Exactly.
and you can practice this yourself, lads, whether you do it in hand or whether you do it ridden. Is just have an experiment. Say, okay, let me do like a tiny little baby one, and then let me do like a 30-degree one. And then let me do like a 45-degree one where they're like crossing all 4 legs. And then let me take it to that and see what the difference is and see where your horse is. There seems to be a sweet spot. And does your horse over time get more versatile? Can your horse actually move between these lesser or greater angles with more and more ease as he becomes more familiar with the whole deal?
Right.
Or indeed, do some of your horses need a tiny little baby one, and others actually seem to prefer a big one? That there's so much variety just within that one movement.
Right. So there are 2 ways that the horse will try to make this movement easier. One is that they'll reduce the angle. They'll make it like, as you said, a baby shoulder in, so that that inside hind leg is not truly stepping quite under the weight, right? Under the center of mass. So that's like me going to yoga with weights and cleverly picking up the 3-pound weight, right? Instead of the 10-pound weight.
And you actually might need to do that in your early stages. I think that's a mistake that is often made in horse training. It's like, let them come into it gradually, lads, just in the way that you would want to yourself.
Absolutely. So he talks in this chapter about the ideal shoulder in, but that's not how you teach. What you do is you teach, as Nuno Oliveira would say, he sometimes says a 1/8 shoulder in. So 1/8 of, let's say, 32 degrees is only like about 4 degrees. It's very, very little. So a 1/8, a 1/4.
Right, but the horse sure as hell feels it. Yeah.
Yes, the horse definitely feels it. The other way that the horse can evade or make this, when they're put in the path of the orientation where their center of mass is directly in the path of that inside hind leg, is the horse can make himself more sideways. He can make it 45 degrees. And then what that inside hind leg, in this case, the left hind leg, is doing is it's actually stepping behind and across the center of mass. So it's evading the weight. And then this is usually coincides with the horse's outside hind leg also stepping out from underneath the mass.
Right. So it becomes almost like a leg yield up the wall, not a shoulder in.
Yes, this is a very a steep angle leg yield. So that isn't to say that a steep angle leg yield doesn't have suppling characteristics, that the horse is getting mobility, but it does not have. So we're showing that the horse can move his legs in different dimensions, but it's not creating strength. You only get the strengthening when we add this perfect amount of weight.
Right. And I think, as you say, what La Guérinière is describing there is an ideal. And one thing I like that you brought up Oliveira, because what Oliveira often reassures us with is saying, listen, guys, don't worry if it's not perfect for a bit. It's not going to be. No, the pole is not going to be the highest point. It's just not. No, if they're not going to step over properly, they're just not. It's okay. Let them have a learning curve, but know where your ideal is that you're trying to get towards, and little by little you'll get there. I think that's a very rational and sane idea, rather than saying, because as you know, so often in dressage, you go in front of an instructor who's like, no, it must be correct from the get-go. It's like, well, what are the odds of that? I'm pretty fluent in a couple of other languages. I can tell you that it took me a while, and I still make a bunch of mistakes. Surely we are allowed a learning curve, and can we not honor and respect that learning curve? Yeah.
Right. Well, I'm not sure if de la Guérinière says this, but he says that and that each training session, let's say you're going to train for 40 minutes, in a way should a little bit retrace and review the history of the horse's training, all the good training that the horses had to date. So even if you have a pre-St. George horse, you spend a few minutes reviewing what it was like when he was 4 years old and 5 years old and 6 years old and at these lower levels. So the normal thing to do when you start to think shoulder in on a day is to do shoulder 4.
Yeah.
Do a small angle, do a 10, 11 degree angle, and then feel it out and see what is the deficit. Am I losing suspension? Am I losing the swing in the back? Am I losing the balance? Am I losing the
And where is my
rhythm?
horse today? Does he feel comfortable? Does he feel good in
Right.
it? Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Is he bracing? And then do a complementary exercise on, let's say, an opposing wall that restores that. Oh, maybe I've lost the bend. Then you do a circle. You do a circle on single track to rest the horse and start over. And he also says that he definitely says this, that you always have, if you lose the roundness and you lose the gait and you lose the attentiveness to the aids and the softness on the aids, you always have a circle. You can just do a circle and return back to the wall. And then he says this, it's only in one sentence here. It's only in one sentence, but it's a super important sentence. I could find it, but I didn't highlight it. And he basically says the essence of the shoulder in is the feeling of spiraling out from a smaller circle to a larger circle, and then ultimately spiraling out and then following that down the wall. This is the essence of going from basically, 100 or 150 years before, going from Newcastle to de la Guérinière. I actually do that. I start on the circle and I spiral out, and I have people always start their shoulder ins on a circle first, because what I'm doing is I'm doing Newcastle, which is a little bit on the forehand, but clearly making the obedience to the leg. And then I spiral the rider out, and then we just find ourselves on the wall. If the wall becomes too troublesome, or we lose the integrity of the gait, we lose the top line,
Or it becomes tense. Yeah.
Or we lose the bend, or the horse
Yeah.
is tilting its head, or clamping at the jaw. Make a circle.
Yeah.
Just
Exactly.
make a circle.
Take the tension off
and
away.
and he also says, if the horse is becoming shut down, you're doing the shoulder in on the wall. Then you need to ride on the center line and just restore the gait and go, as he says it over and over, in the brisk gait. And he's usually talking about the trot.
Yeah.
The other thing that he talks about is teaching this in the walk first. And if a rider has not done this, and if a horse has not done this, do it in the walk first. You have to also be the custodian of the gait.
Absolutely.
You must not.
You
must not let this walk get into this ponderous, slow rhythm.
Right.
And the goal is that he actually says, then you do it in the passage, not, for us mortals, we can do it in the trot, but he does say to do it in the passage, and only after the horse is good to do it in the passage, then you can do it in the canter.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And there is a slight difficulty in translation there, because in French today they will still use a word passager,
Right.
as opposed to passage. And I slightly suspect he might have meant, I'm interpreting here, I slightly suspect he might have meant passager. Passager is like a collected trot, effectively. Something you might do before a little trot, a bit of a jog, really effectively.
Yeah.
And then you can bring your passage later out of that. I slightly suspect he's thinking along those lines, but hey, we're not a fly on the wall in 1730. Okay.
Right.
Chapter 11, that's the shoulders in, super important. Tell us about chapter 12.
So in chapter 12, he calls it, translated into English, croup to the wall.
Croup of
And the
you.
one, yeah. So thank you. Yeah. I know French, but you've got better pronunciation. So croup to the wall. So basically what he says, when you get to the end of the wall of shoulder in, that you then need to turn the horse around and go back. So let's say we're doing the shoulder in left. We've done the shoulder in left. We're at the end of the wall, tracking left. We're near the corner. He basically says, turn the horse around. So this would be like not quite a half pirouette, or it could be a little passade. It could be a little bit of a, and he says,
by the way,
cheval-
quickly, passade. That's
Yeah.
not a word that many modern dressage riders will know. It's a little bit like a pirouette, but
Right.
wider and grander. Think like Western rollbacky type thing.
Yeah. It's a little tiny half circle where the horse is doing it in haunches in, and the second half passing, if you will, back to the wall. So you've done basically a 180, but you've retained the bend. So in this case, in this example, you've retained the left
The
bend.
banana is still in the same direction.
Pardon?
The banana. I was taught.
Yes,
bananas.
yes.
Like
Yes.
if your banana going up the wall is sort of
Bent left.
like that, you come around. You don't change the bend. The bend
Correct.
remains the same. The banana
Correct.
remains the same. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what you do is that's why I said not quite 180 degrees, because you stop short of bringing the shoulders all the way into the track. The shoulders are now on an inside track.
Yeah.
In this, what I'm croup to the wall, another name, an easy name in English is called Haunches-Out. Some people in the dressage set might call it renvers.
Renvers. This is what we're talking about. Yeah.
But I like to call it Haunches-Out because it's just easier to say, but we can call it croup to the wall. So when
effectively, to be fair with that, you could honestly call a shoulder in a Haunches-Out, because the arse is still to the wall. So if you had someone who had no the dressage-ness at all, they might go, well, lads, I mean, I don't know, the arse is to the wall, whatever you do. So renvers is not unhelpful,
right?
Because if you say croup to the wall, well, again, that could be a shoulders in, frankly.
Correctly.
You know what I mean? So
and this is why
I quite like renvers. I'm on team renvers. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer haunches in and haunches out, or shoulder in, shoulder out, because that second word in tells the rider that the bend is to the inside of the arena.
If you've explained that first.
Yeah.
But you and I both know that you can go up against a bazillion dressage instructors. Like when I'm training with the Master Valenza, he'll say half pass down the wall. And that could mean travers, or that could mean renvers. And I have to know kind of by the context. And if I get it wrong, he'll go, ugh. And then I'm like, oh,
wrong bend.
Shit. And then I'll turn my horse around the other way. But I mean, Christ, so, whether you call it renvers, whether you call it croup au mur or Haunches-Out, this is what we're talking about. It's basically like a shoulder in, but you're bent the other way. Instead of bending the horse away from the horse's head and neck, away from the direction you're going, it's now bent where you are going. And that, my friends, is not easy. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So the semantic.
Why is it important, though? Why is this renvers, whatever we want to call it, why is it so important, chapter 12?
Okay. So when we're going back to the shoulder in this left hind leg, we're teaching the horse's left hind leg to step under the weight while the left side of his body is in contraction or shortened. So the horse's flanks on the left are shorter.
One side stretched, one side clenched. Yeah.
Right. So the left oblique abdominals are short. The lower abdominal muscles on the left of the horse are short when you're doing shoulder in, and the left hind leg is the one being strengthened.
If you're going to the left, right, yeah,
going to the left. Now, when we do the haunches out or croup to the wall in this same example, the horse's right hind leg is now being asked to step under the mass. So the mass
So you
is
go-
now put,
What was the inside leg now becomes the outside
yeah.
hind leg.
So the right, yeah. So from the rider's standpoint, when we were in shoulder in, the left leg is your the leg that's actively asking for displacement of the haunches. And the right leg of the rider is the one that is guarding. It's a guard leg. Guarding what? Guarding to make sure that the horse's outside hind leg, the right leg, is not stepping out from under the mass.
Right. As
it's
it would in
staying
the
under
leg
its
yield.
body.
Yeah, yeah.
So we could say that one is a little bit more passive, but not absent. Okay. And the other one is more active. So your left leg is the active driving and displacing leg, while your right leg is passively guarding. It doesn't mean it's not completely unemployed.
Right.
When we go to,
But it's not putting
Yeah.
pressure on and blocking. Yeah. Yeah.
right. But if the horse were to step out with the right hind leg, and
We can catch it.
you can catch it, right? So when we go to the Haunches-Out or Croup to the wall, still with the left bend, now going around the arena to the right, but we're at the beginning of the long wall. The left leg of the rider acts as the guard leg at the girth.
Yeah.
The right leg of the rider now is the active asking leg. It's the leg that asks the horse's right hind leg to step under his mass, carry more weight, load itself. And what is the left leg guarding? It's guarding that the left hind leg does not step out from under the mass. It's also guarding and protecting the bend. Because if we don't have that left leg on at the girth in this Haunches-Out, then we could just have a straight horse going sideways down the wall. So the left leg is
There's no bend.
It is the object around which the horse is to bend. But I
Fine.
often say, you bend, how many legs does it take to fill in the blank? It always takes two. It always takes two legs on the rider to do everything.
Right. As
Because-
Sophia Valencia used to scream at me, Rupert, you have two legs. Use them.
Right. Why? Here's why. Why can't we just be a one-armed paper hanger or a one-legged horseman? Because the horse always has a left side and a right side. He doesn't suddenly, when we're thinking about crossing his right hind leg in a Haunches-Out or a Croup to the wall, he doesn't just say, yeah, I don't need to hold any weight with my left leg. I can abandon it. And I had a teacher, Jula, would say to this, Richard, do not abandon the horse with your left leg.
And
In
to
other
be
words, you
fair,
have
to be fair to most beginner riders when they're doing this, it's intuitive for a rider to push that inside leg away from the horse, feeling that they need to give that horse some space to go there. It's actually quite a counterintuitive thing to let your leg hang lightly at that inside girth while you move in that direction. Because of course, if you do any tension on it, you block, the horse can't go. If you abandon, as you say, the horse goes "Bleh," and sort of falls apart. Finding that sweet spot is not easy.
Okay, but here is the other thing. That left leg in the Haunches-Out, renvers, or Croup to the wall, the other thing that left leg does for the rider is it keeps the rider upright.
Sure.
It keeps the rider vertical above their, in this case, left seat bone. If the rider extends that left leg out in front of him, what the rider does, and riders are very, very tempted to do, they're tempted to lean back to the right to use the leverage of their upper body,
push the horse
add,
over from the
to
outside.
add more leverage to their right leg. And this is, so many, many riders counter sit the
Meaning sit to the outside and try and push the horse over.
Yeah, and they try to double the influence of that right leg, the outside leg back behind the girth, by leaning to the outside hind. However, this does not help the horse. It makes the horse go sideways, yes, but it doesn't put weight on that right hind leg because the weight is you're leaning your weight away from it.
I couldn't agree more, and this is why I teach the way I was taught to do it in Portugal, which is before riders can really do all this stuff that you're talking about, because they can't initially. No way. Like, no way. No, I couldn't.
Mhm.
I help them from the ground. I'm
Yes.
there at the shoulder. I create it for them. And then I say, look, just look in that direction. Put your body a bit like this and the horse
Right.
is just going to go because I'm going to help him go. I'm not going to put everything on your shoulders, the rider, to be
Right.
responsible for making all this shit happen. You know,
Right.
it's just not fair, you know. But eventually, yes, eventually you won't
Yes.
need Auntie Rupert at the shoulder to help you do it. But while we're learning, let's have Auntie Rupert at the shoulder just because it's going to make it easier and we don't have
Right.
tension come through. And then later on, Auntie Rupert will come away and yeah, sure, you'll be able to do it by yourself. Yeah,
Right. And this is why you want to have a schoolmaster
absolutely.
to teach the novice rider, the rider who hasn't done this movement before. You don't want to have a green horse.
Yeah, you need a horse that can show him how to do it.
You need a horse that when the rider gets an approximation of the aids, that the horse will just say, oh, yes, you're asking for croup to the wall, haunches out, no problem, renvers, yes. Finally, you got 80% of the aids correct. I'll do it for you. That's a good enough average. But when you have a young horse with a green rider, it's and he says that, as any of these experts say, Podolsky, de Pluvinel, de la Guérinière, they all say the same thing. You have the green rider or the inexperienced rider needs the most advanced horse.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
Yes.
So listen, just before we go further with that, we got chapter 11, we got chapter 12. So chapter 11 says, listen, lads, shoulder in, good thing. Then renvers, good thing. Maybe we're going to put them together and get something, right?
Right.
What might we get?
Okay. So earlier, I said when you're doing the shoulder in, that left hind leg is working while the iliopsoas complex on the left side is shortened and the right side is expanded. Now, I know
is that an area of Mars, by the way, or is that a punk band from Croatia in the early 1980s? Sorry,
it's a very complex intersection that looks kind of like a big clover leaf. So what's happening is the right hind leg is now being gymnasticized.
Okay,
it's now being gymnasticized while that side of its body is in expansion or stretching.
Right.
So now we've done the exercise when we have an expansion of the rib cage and the flanks on that side. So none of this is perfect until you go the other way and now do the shoulder in to the right and then turn around and do the croup to the wall with the right bend.
And if we put shoulder in and croup to the wall or renvers together, somehow, what fruit is going to grow from that branch that we can pluck and eat?
Now what we've done is if we've done haunches in, or rather shoulder in, haunches out to the left and shoulder in, haunches out to the right, we have given both hind legs the experience of carrying more weight, right? Carrying more weight.
Be under the point of gravity. Got it?
Yes, with the flexibility and mobility of the torso. And this is the other thing that.
But
this is the other thing.
Why? What are we gonna get? We're gonna get something, and you know what we're gonna get. So just get to the point and tell us.
We're going to get.
You know what we're gonna get. What we're gonna get?
We're gonna get increased weight bearing.
No, we're gonna get something. You know what we're gonna get. You're gonna get what he says we're gonna get. Tell us what we're gonna get. Tell us what we're gonna get. Go on. Don't stop teasing us.
Increased weight bearing capacity by the haunches, which is the other word for that is collection, or you're training the horse to take more weight on both hind legs and to lighten the forehand.
And what's the way we're gonna probably see that manifest itself first?
Yeah, higher stepping in front.
We're going to get the Piaffe. Come on. He says so. He says so. We're going to get the Piaffe. Listen, we're going to get the Piaffe. It's all right. You can breathe. We're going to get the Piaffe. And it doesn't have to be a Piaffe that you're going to put in front of a judge and get a 9 for. But we're going to get the Piaffe. And what does Piaffe mean in French? It means to strut lightly. And in Parisian slang, it's also a word for a little bird, like a sparrow, the way it hops. And like the cock sparrow in London Cockney, it's like the cock sparrow, he's a little bit like that. He's a little bit like that. He struts. It's a way to strut. And in the next, well, I can't remember if it's in the next chapter, but Guérinière himself does say, if you put this shoulder in thing together with this Croup mur renvers thing together, lads, and then straighten the bugger out, provided you're not blocking anything, you're kind of going to see that.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
If you enjoyed this conversation, help us out. Like it. Please do subscribe. It makes the algorithm notice our stuff and send it out to other horse nerds who might be needing this information. If you really like it, please look at that thank you button down below. Send us $3, $4, $5. It will help us produce more content. And if you want to learn how to actually do the horse training with your pony and have a good time doing it and have your pony have a good time doing it, go to that link for our free heliosharmony.com course that you can see in the description below. And if you want to come and play with our amazing horses and learn how to do this stuff firsthand in our stable, just email us on our website, heliosharmony.com, and we'll take it from there. And last but not least, do make sure to check out xenophonpress.com and all their amazing, accessible and cheap books on the Old Masters. And they do not sponsor this podcast, but we believe in them greatly. We rely on those texts. So do go check out Xenophon Press and buy some of their stuff. It will be a game changer for you and your pony. See you next time.